Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. Today we're going to do a quick, or at least as quick as I can make it, blow through of the Lithia module for the Harn setting from Columbia Games. I've been asked to do some material on the Cities of Harn Kickstarter that was concluded last year quite successfully. I got in on that Kickstarter. I would have wanted to do a video during the Kickstarter. That would have been cool, but for a variety of non-channel related reasons, that did not happen. So we're going to do it now. And in order to lay the groundwork for that, I want to take a look at the Lithia module. Now, I don't have it handy, but there is a print Lithia module from around 1985, 1986, which was one of my favorite products. And virtually all of the things that made it that way are in the current edition. So let's take a look at the Lithia module. So this is a 33-page article on the continent of Lithia. The island of Harn sits off the northwestern coast of this continent, and we'll see that in a minute when we start looking at the maps. This is the continent, and we have immediately into the maps here with the cultural map. Now, this is the western cultural map. The eastern one's on the next page. And over here, we can see the island of Harn up here and its major states, and the major states on the continent of Lithia. Now, which of these areas have seen actual development? Well, most of the development that we have seen in the history of the product line has been on the island of Harn itself over here. But we also have a decent amount of material on Ivinia up here. This is the large island of Ive that is home to the Ivinians, but this adjoining continental area is Ivinian territory as well. We also have a regional module on the Shorkina region, which is down here. This is the large and quite powerful feudal kingdom of Shorkina. We also have a regional map, but no module for the Trirzin region. That is another large, powerful feudal kingdom that broke away from the Azeryan Empire, which is sort of an old and doddering state that has flirted with total collapse and reascendance multiple times over the course of the last several hundred years. But this is the western half of Lithia. Down here to point out a couple other major regions. We have this kind of not super developed area, the Quarf Ivinian states. This is called Quarfor over here. There's a little bit of material on that. There's this large island, at least I recall it being an island, Hepacaria, which is a sort of desert, mostly desert type place. We'll see that in a minute. And we have this subcontinent down here called Anzaloria. You may notice that there's definitely a sort of parallel feel with historical Earth here. That's intentional. That is stronger in some places than others. When we start looking at the continental areas, there's a little less direct parallels with some historical culture. Harn itself is a pretty decent analog of Anglo-Saxon Britain. You definitely have Northmen that have come in and invaded and have taken over a decent chunk of the island. But you also have something that would be fairly incongruous on Anglo-Saxon Britain, which is the former Korani Empire, which you could see as an analog to Roman Britain, I suppose, ruled a good chunk of Western Harn at one point. But getting back to Lithia, we have Eastern Lithia here, and we have even less material on this, other than the names of some of these nations. You have the Shoju Empire, which you are, of course, tempted, reasonably so, to conclude is some kind of Japanese parallel. You have the Empire of Diramoa, which you would, again, think would be a sort of Chinese parallel. But there are also a number of other states down here, and it's never been really clear just how close a parallels these things are. But while we're talking about these different regions and their cultures and nations that are there right now, there's some historical material here. The current state of affairs. There's a section on religion. This is a bit of a can of worms for Harn because there's a whole book on this. And I really like the Harnic pantheon. It's got 10 major deities plus some minor deities and demigods and that kind of stuff. Divine servants, that type of thing. I think it's a really well-rounded and highly usable pantheon of deities. It doesn't have too few deities to be interesting in a pantheistic way. and it doesn't have too many deities to the point where you're scratching your head over, well, who's that again? Forgotten Realms can be like that. I remember the old Faiths and Avatars. I think it was called Faiths and Avatars book for Forgotten Realms, which is, by the way, one of my favorite AD&D second edition books. But it details this enormous pantheon of the Forgotten Realms. And not only are there a huge number of deities in there, but there are also 2 companion books that are the same size that have just as many deities in them. So you have this bewildering number of different gods of different power levels. I liked that. I liked those products, but it's more than you need to keep track of in your head. You're never going to really need more than about 10 deities, and that's about what Harn gives you. The rest will be, just like little local deities and stuff like that. The 10 Harnic deities are pretty much the deities of the continent, but there are some additional continental deities that maybe are the same ones as are worshipped on Harn, and there's a couple that don't look like they are. Some of the nations on the continent, like Azurion, for example, the Morgothian church is very prominent there, and that is a church that is proscribed on most of Harn, except in Rithim, and I think in the Thardic Republic as well. So moving on, we have a topography and vegetation map. Obviously, this is at a super high level, and we get a brief description of what all these different vegetation types mean. We'll get to the big map at the end here. We have an economic map. Now, I've always found this kind of thing fairly useful because you could build this into campaign hooks. So, for example, if we zoom in on Harn, I'm not sure how well you can see that. If we zoom in on Harn itself, you can see that, okay, so these are the commodities that Harn has enough of to export. Wild beast wool, glasswares, jewelry, and metalwork, and whale oil. And furthermore, metalwork here, this is the kingdom of Azadmir. This is dwarven metalwork, and glasswares corresponds with the kingdom of Ivale, so that is elven glasswares. So you can, and even something as mundane as wool, you could tie something into that. It's like, there is a ship, a wool transport leaving tomorrow, and it is going to some place that the PCs may need to go, for example. Very easy to work this kind of detail into your campaign, in my opinion. Let's center again so that my ugly mug is not in the way. And here's the eastern half of that. There are some notes on general agricultural patterns and how trade works and things like that. This is one of the things that really spoke to me, in the original Lithium module, was this big language section. Now, you're not getting a conlang level detail here, right? We'll see what we have, and some of this material is actually new to this article. It wasn't in the original. But we have basically a broad description of these language families, and if we scroll down enough, we have a big language map so we can see where these things are spoken. So we can see, for example, that on the island of Harn, this Harnic and Geranese, which are basically the same language at this point, Geranese is kind of a dialect, is what's spoken on Harn. But on the continent, it's a little bit different. You have Urili, which is spoken in the northern sections of Ivinia. You have Ivinian, which is spoken in the rest of Ivinia. But you also have Palathanian, which is a dialect of Ivinian. And so you can see here what languages are related to what languages. And in fact, there is a family tree on the next page showing you that. Okay, so Harnic is descended from Old Harnic, which is descended in turn from Fari, the language of the Faric invaders that invaded during the Migration Wars. But it's also influenced by Geranese, which dates back quite a long ways on the island, since the Jaren are the actual indigenous humans to the island of Harn. And we have similar levels of detail on other languages of the continent. This is something that's new. I think this was mentioned and maybe briefly talked about in the original Lithium module, but this is a big section on the different scripts. So if the language is a written language, what script do they use to write it? Well, this is what tells you that. And in fact, the Lakis alphabet, which is very common in Western Lithia in general, we get a whole little alphabet thing here, which tells us how these things are, how this works. This is the only piece of real conlang level detail we get in all of Harn. that's never been something that the creators seem to be particularly concerned about, although there is a pronunciation guide floating around somewhere. I will mention, because my pronunciations of some of these names are going to differ from the official pronunciations, and I don't care particularly. I'm pronouncing them the way I think they sound the coolest. I would encourage you to do the same. And then we have a big index. Now, what this is it's kind of like the Harn Dex. It's a little less detailed, obviously, because it's a smaller map with fewer names on it. But it is a list with at least some information on every named thing on the Lithia map. So, and it's like good half the module, actually. So if we page down through this, we're going to see the end, and then we get to the map. Now, this is a more or less, let me zoom out here. This is a more or less straight reproduction of the original lithium map that was included in the original module. I'm a little, on the one hand, you'd think would have redone it, but on the other hand, it's a gorgeous map. I think this is a 4-panel map in its original incarnation. I still have mine, and I've always loved this particular map. This really places the island of Harn and the places that have been developed either by fans or by Columbia Games, the original publishers, or Celestia Publications, which is N. Robin Crosby's group, who has passed away, but they're still working. These rectangles on this map represent what we call regions. There is, with each region, associated a regional module. Now, in fact, there's only 3 of these regional modules that have ever been created. There's one for Harn, there's one for Ivinia, and there's one for Shorkina. But those contain a lot of high-level detail about the kingdoms that are there, about what's going on in that region. The stuff that Columbia Games has recently done has been a lot of revisions of older material, which I'm happy to see, because for a long time this stuff was really hard to get. It took me years to run down the number of Harn print products that I have now, and a great deal of that, maybe not all of it, and in fact definitely not all of it, but a lot of that material is now available again digitally in a sort of remastered format. And I'll show you very briefly the stuff that was included with the Kickstarter. It was, if you bought into the Kickstarter at like the full level, you got all the stretch goals, and there's a lot of material there. So this is the whole map. Like I said, I've always really loved this map. So I'm going to show you just my file folder. I'm not going to show you all these files, obviously. But if you bought into the full level of the Kickstarter, where you were getting all of the cities, in addition to the cities, you also got all this other stuff. And I think the map is just free for download on Columbia's website, maybe on DriveThruRPG too. You can get all this stuff either from Columbia or through DriveThruRPG, and I believe Columbia still sells print versions of it, but considering it's just printed on demand stuff, I think there's absolutely no sense in doing that. You just buy the digital things and print it yourself, however you want. But there's a lot of material here. There's this little general article on cities and towns. There's a big article for each city. I don't want to even open one of those because it's a whole can of worms. And then that'll be the next video in the Cities of Harn series, okay? So we will be getting to the Cities of Harn. We'll see how I want to do that. I haven't really decided whether I want to dig more deeply into one city article, then point you at the others, or cover more briefly each different city. But there is also an article here, I will point out, on Cathera, which is the planet that Harn and Lithia are on. There is an article on Celestia, which is the sort of overall overarching cosmology. There's articles on astrology and the Earth Masters, which are an ancient culture that has long vanished. Some of the trade routes here have individual articles. There's just a ton of material here. With the Harn core module, which I think is called the Harn World Master module now, I believe. I have an unboxing video of it, of the print copy of it, back in the channel if you want to check that out. And this stuff, man, you got enough material to last you essentially forever. And as I keep mentioning, Harn is absolutely rich with adventure hooks. So that was the Lithia module. I'm not going to go through every one of these modules. I'm not going to do an individual video on any one of these modules. But if there's a if there's a particular city you would like to see, or if you'd like to see me cover all of them, then please mention it in the comments below. I will mention that there is an Ardwulf's Lair Patreon now. The official launch of that is tomorrow, but there is a link to it. Is live for sort of pre-launch. There's a link to it in the video description, so please check that out and consider patronizing Ardwulf's Lair and helping me create more and better content. I want to thank you for watching. Please like the video if you have enjoyed watching it. Please subscribe to the channel, and feel free to always share the videos around. That is fantastic. It is an enormous help to the channel and hopefully to the material that we're covering here. Again, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.